Please stand by for our next program.
This is All India Radio. You will now hear comments from the press. The Asian Age in its editorial title, Let Chandrayaan-2 Miss, Not Mar Future Mission, says, Indian Space Research Organisation ISRO Chairman Dr. K. Shivan's 15 minutes of terror came true in horrifying detail early Saturday morning when, with the world and Prime Minister Narendra Modi watching the nation's much-vaunted space program faced a setback as its unmanned spacecraft Chandrayaan-2's two probe Vikram and Pragyan failed to make a soft landing on the far side of the moon. The razor-thin margin between success and failure when it comes to the launch of rockets, satellites or interplanetary probes came back to haunt India, which came this close to joining an exclusive club that has so far been the preserve of the United States, Russia and China. India can take comfort from the fact that NASA's National Aeronautics and Space Administration Moon Fact Sheet that lists the success rate of lunar missions in the last 6 decades states that of the 109 lunar expeditions during this period, 61 were successful while 48 failed. Clearly, Saturday's setback when the communication link with ground stations was lost a mere 2.1 kilometer away from its lunar landing site cannot be written off as a complete failure. Much science is expected from Chandrayaan-2, the mothership which will continue to circle the moon at a distance of 100 km. Chandrayaan-1, the first in the series of man-made India lunar probes, had provided path-breaking results, the discovery of water ice being one of them. It also ensured that a probe planted the Indian tricolour on lunar soil. At this juncture, it's unclear why the lander rover proved a case of so near yet so far. First reports point at two potential factors. One of the 4 mini-rocket engines on board Vikram meant to decelerate the descent malfunctioned, which resulted in a sudden spurt in the speed of the lander minutes before the anticipated touchdown, pushing Vikram away from its designated path of downward glide. And 2, the damage caused to electronic sensors on board by the scorching heat of the mini-rocket engines could have also affected the glide. Either way, with their vast experience in cracking problems relating to satellites, scientific probes and rockets, space scientists will have little difficulty in identifying the rogue component which triggered the snag and initiate corrective steps during their upcoming expedition to the moon, a collaborative venture with JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, in 2 years' time. The Statesman, in its editorial title, Robert Mugabe, says, an era in African history ends with the passing of Robert Mugabe in Singapore on Friday. At 95, he would perhaps have died a happier man if Zimbabwe's ruling ZANU PF party had declared him as a national hero during his lifetime. Given the proclivity of the former president to stoke controversies and the possible reaction within Africa and the Europe of the Wyeths, the party waited for his funeral to get underway in the nation that he ruled with an iron fist for almost 40 years, indeed since his election in 1980 until his ouster in a military coup in 2017. Despite the fact that he was in limbo for the past 2 years, his struggle against racism and his death do mark the definitive end of a phase in the former British colony. Reactions to his death have been mixed in Zimbabwe, across Africa and around the world, in itself a commentary on the inherent contradictions of the man, which explains why paeans went hand in hand with furious debunking. Initially hailed as a hero of Africa's independence struggle, his long rule was mired in tyranny and corruption. In a sense, he was a benevolent repressor whose standing in the continent of Africa was over the decades reduced to that of an international pariah. It was more than an albatross around his neck that he had to bear till his final hours on Friday. There is little doubt that Mugabe was an icon of liberation, a Pan-Africanist who dedicated his life to the emancipation and empowerment of his people. Very succinctly has he been sized up by the neighboring South Africa's ruling African National Congress. He has been praised as a friend, statesman and revolutionary comrade. In a statement, the ANC acknowledged that it had sometimes differed vociferously with him, though he was indubitably an ardent and vocal advocate of African unity and self-reliance. His final years in power were characterized by financial collapse, violent intimidation and a vicious internal power struggle. Opposition to his rule intensified in 1999 as the economy floundered and trade unions organized the movement for democratic change. Mugabe rigged elections and began a program of land reform in which white armors were forcibly evicted to make way for ZANU PF party or black Zimbabweans who lacked the skills and capital to farm. In the net, Zimbabwe was on the cusp of economic disarray marked by hyperinflation and empty supermarket shelves. The school and health systems began to crumble. The political environment became increasingly hostile, with activists and journalists persecuted, jailed or murdered. He was a liberation leader, but never a national leader. Robert Mugabe's epitaph can be as stark as that. Those were the comments from the press, presented to you by the News Services Division of All India Radio.
This broadcast came to you from the Delhi station of